Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky. And man, I'm excited for issue 125, landmark issue 125 of G.I. Joe, Real American Hero. For you new listeners, this is the podcast where I cover every issue of G.I. Joe, Real American Hero, page by page, panel by panel. We also have covered every cartoon from the Sunbow era and the DIC era and the Extreme era. And we'll be getting to the more modern eras soon. Hopefully sooner rather than later, actually, because really, with us hitting 125, that's pretty much a milestone. That leaves only 27 more issues left to go of the original Real American Hero run. And that, for real, will be right around the corner. That's 27 weeks. Do the math on that. That's probably about 6 months. So this 6 months from now, we'll be wrapping up G.I. Joe Real American Hero, which is kind of exciting. Yeah, kind of exciting. Especially, I have not revisited these actual comic books in a long time. The earlier stuff, like the stuff that I hit, like really first started reading G.I. Joe with, issues 30s through, late 20s through 60, 70, like that era. That's really when I first started collecting comic books, period. I must have reread those issues realistically at least 5 times a piece, because my comic collection wasn't that big, so I would just keep rereading them. So when you get to this portion, at least for me, this is came out, cover dated June 92. So June of 92, I would have been which was on the stands in something like March of 92. So I would have been like a junior in high school, and while certainly I was still way into comics and stuff, I was reading more comics. I was getting more into Marvel and reading more of the X books and more mainstream Marvel Universe stuff. So I was not revisiting the same issue of G.I. Joe over and over again. So there's a better than good chance that this is probably like the second time I've even read these issues, because these also then weren't reprinted very often, if ever, really, in the old trade paperback days. In fact, like the modern IDW reprints, they never went this far. Those nice hardcovers, they stopped. Like volume 8 was around 90s, in the number numerically in the 90s or something like that. Because I know I've been on these. I've been on the singular issues for quite a while now. So yeah, this is an untapped era of Joe that a lot of people really haven't read, and I haven't revisited. So that's why it's funny. There's a lot of stuff where I'll pose questions like, do they ever? Does this guy live? Does that guy come back? And it's great because I get listeners occasionally being like, yeah, they come back in blanket. I'm like, but like, I've read it, but I don't remember it. So I'm really going fresh issue to issue. So if you are new, welcome aboard. And if you're a returning guest, if you're a returning listener, thanks for going along for the ride. I know I talked to a lot of you guys out there on social media, at Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, at Joe on Joe Pod. We've got some great supporters over at our Patreon, patreon.com/Joe on Joe Pod, that help keep the show afloat there. You can send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Now, while you're online, you're rating and reviewing, and you're clicking on your podcatcher, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars for every other podcast, and 1 star for me. I want you to give 5 stars also to the podcast Movies and a Meal, because they are our fantastic sponsors.
Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts. And you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not one movie? It's about not 2 movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out one episode a week. Give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show.
And so this week, before we jump into the actual reviews of the show, we're going to touch a little bit, and this is off the cuff, off the top of my head, so I don't really know where I'm going with this, but we're going to touch a little bit on two humongous losses that the comic book community has faced recently. I briefly touched on it last week during my my commentary on the loss of Gilbert Gottfried, but Neil Adams and George Perez passed recently. Neil Adams was 2 weeks ago, and George Perez was on Saturday, was on Free Comic Book Day of all days. Certainly a mythic portend, a day that is, it's always the first Saturday in May. And so it's not always going to be that date, but whatever, every 7 years it'll be that date, or however that works out. It'll be an anniversary of George Perez. I think maybe, let's get this started. We start calling it, although nothing's really better branding than Free Comic Book Day, but George Perez Day. Those two giants, in regards to G.I. Joe, they both touched G.I. Joe peripherally. Neil Adams did some more recent alt covers for G.I. Joe. I know he did one of the big annuals that IDW put out. So if you Google Neil Adams and G.I. Joe, you're going to see a fair amount of stuff, a few works that he did in more recent years, and there's dynamite. George did not. When we first talked about this a few months back, I put out the call. G.I. It was hashtag G.I. George, to see does anyone have any real work of G.I. Joe by George Perez. The only thing we really were able to unearth is that wonderful, beautiful Baroness photo, which then became the wallpaper on my phone. So I've been staring at the George Perez Baroness for 6 months since the last time we talked about this. But he didn't really touch too much in the G.I. Joe world. But what they both were massively, hugely influential. So we'll start with Neil, and then we'll end up with George. For those of you who don't know, Neil Adams was the forefront of creator rights in the 70s. He was the Elvis of comic books, in kind of this new generation with this great new realistic, humanistic style. Everyone wanted to be like him. Everyone wanted to draw like him. John Byrne came out of his school, and he came out of the Kirby school. He looked at what Kirby did and brought a more humanistic approach to it with some of Kirby's posings and like Kirby's design aesthetics. But Neil then took that and went in a humanistic way and made the characters more real world, and they could jump off the page at you. And then the very next generation, and when I say generation, I'm talking about 5-6 years later generation of comic artists, people like John Byrne, who I have absolute respect for. They took that Neil Adams style and they made it their own. They tamed it a little bit. They honed it, they sharpened it in places, and then that led to this a more streamlined version of that style in the 80s, where it was this humanistic look with more cartoonish sensibilities, which led to the cartoonish sensibilities taking over in the Image era, with reflexively going back to some of that Neil Adams posing, right? So it's this, comics are this real long continuum of influences. The American comics, I'm talking, don't get me wrong. I am talking American comics. I'm not speaking on, overall global influences. But Neil Adams was the tip of that spear. But even more than that, he fought for creator rights, and he's the man responsible for shaming, which is the only way to rightfully phrase it, shaming Warner Brothers into paying Siegel and Schuster any money for Superman. When they were making the movie, he found out and learned that I forget, what was it, Siegel or Schuster was, they were living, let me think, I think it was Schuster, was, they were living pretty much penniless, and just hanging out. These are the guys who created Superman. And Warner Brothers was about to make $1 million blockbuster. At the time, $1 million blockbuster was a term for a huge deal. And he went to the press with it, and he brought it to the fore, and he said, this isn't right. And he started bringing them up in interviews, and he was a big name, and he had done Muhammad Ali versus Superman, or Superman versus Muhammad Ali rather, and the Green Lantern, Green Arrow relevancy era had already hit. So he was a commodity, and to take that stage and to use it for other people and to further his medium, his loved medium that he worked in, to advance that is great, is tremendous, and it is absolutely being of service to others. And it worked. It worked. Warner Brothers ponied up real money and created an annual stipend. You could say was it enough, or was this or was that, but it was something, and it was an absolute advancement. Got them creator rights, and every time you see Superman used in anything, it says created by Siegel and Schuster. That is because of the work that Neil Adams did. From a cartoon to a TV show to a movie, that is 100% due to Neil Adams raising his hand and saying this ain't right. And then that kind of attitude, that kind of creator-owned attitude, he took with him, and he did continuity comics in the 80s. So during that time, he dropped away from doing mainstream stuff, and he did his own stuff to some varying degrees of success. Some of that, I've read some of that stuff. It's decent. It's funny, like what was it? There's one of his big muscle guys. He's got, why am I blanking on the name of it? But it's like one of his big superhero type leader characters. He's got almost the exact same logo as Ultra Boy from Legion of Superheroes. Megatac, I think. And it's and as a kid, when I would see that, I would get really confused, because there were a lot of similarities in the design, and I was always like, what is happening? Yeah, so continuity comics, he did a lot. He also made his own, he went and worked in advertising and made his fortunes there, his family fortunes there, and just was just a dude that was out doing it, and nobody loved Neil Adams more than Neil Adams did, but nobody deserved it more than Neil Adams did. And that's just my third party outside observer view. He was always cool when I met him. He's always very nice to people that I saw him interacting with. And he's just a massive talent. And then that brings us to George Perez, who is universally beloved. The thing with George was that when it came out that he was sick and dying and not, just not going to be going through chemo so that he could enjoy the rest of his days pain-free, the world outpouring of love for this man was humbling to see, and it made you want to be a better person, made you go, okay, if that happened today, I don't think I would get that kind of support from people. So why, how can I lead a better life and be kinder? And I'm not talking globally. I'm talking literally to the people that know you. How can I get the people that know me to think of me like a George Perez? Because that's how you want to be remembered. Just the kind, generous, loved, beloved talent. And that's before you even get to his artistic gifts and the things that he gave to the comic book community and comic book fandom as far as creativity. He was just it was constant President Cons always generous with sketches and signatures and pictures. There's so many pictures floating around of George with fans. Like he understood that his fandom was where it's at. These are the people that he did it for, and we did it. I actually don't mean to ascribe his motives there, but like you see it, you get it. He got it. That's what it seemed to me, that he got it. That fandom will reward you if you reward them back. And he owed us nothing more than, his best work. And he certainly gave that in spades. I think I've really been trying to think about this. My first exposure to George's artwork, I genuinely think, was Crisis. And maybe technically I think I saw him with some covers over in during the Byrne era on Superman, because that was my first DC book that I was reading, and it was all the Byrne stuff. So I would have seen him do some of that Byrne work. But as far as like understanding who he was as a penciler, Crisis was one of the first things that I picked up as a kid, which, if you think about it, that is daunting. That is ridiculously daunting. That is, it is akin to handing someone a Watchman. I've never read a comic book before and saying, here's a Watchman, go for it. And I had no history of DC. I had no knowledge of who any of these people were. And yet they were so clearly drawn and delineated, and I understood what was happening from page to page, panel to panel, that it was easy for me to understand. I certainly didn't know who everyone was in that book. To this day, there's still people I go, oh, that guy looks vaguely familiar. But I understood the story and I understood what was going on. And, as far as Crisis goes, a lot of people say, oh, the story's a little meandering, a little this, a little that. I love it. I've always loved it. I think it works. But even with that complicated plot, it took a talent like George Perez to make it legible, especially to a brand new reader's eyes. And I would have been a brand new reader who would have been probably 11 or 12 years old reading it at the time. And because I got them as back issues, came out in 85. I got them as back issues when I was starting to get into comics other than G.I. Joe. And I remember everyone was talking about how important Crisis was. So I figured that would be the place to start. And so that had to be it. The other early one would have been the Judas Contract. That also, because back then, you got things like Comic Shop News, or Marvel Age, and DC would have their direct bullets or direct currents, like the little teaser page in the back of DC books. But if you weren't reading DC books, you really were only teased about it in Comic Shop News, which was like a weekly publication about the comic industry that would be at your comic shop. They're still around in some form. I don't know if they still print actual printed versions of it. I know they did it as of a few years ago. But this was before Wizard magazine, ladies and gentlemen. It's way before the internet, so that wasn't a thing. I've talked before on the show about I would look through the ads in the comic books I was reading from like New England Comics or Mile High Comics, and they would say, hey, get issues blankety 5, 6, 7 of Crisis for only $3 a piece, like that kind of a thing. So like that would be exciting. Or I would literally read the price guide, not cover to cover, but like flip through it, and the price guide would have little notations like Death of Supergirl. So you'd be like, oh, that must be an important issue, things like that. So it was harder to get the word out about a series like Crisis when it wasn't coming out in the moment. You weren't reading any other DC comics. So I think it was either Crisis would have been my first George Perez exposure, if not then the Judas Contract, which I picked up as one of the earliest trades that I've ever got, a collection of that. And that was because I think that was because of a promo comic that DC put out talking about how great that story was. And I picked, and sure enough, I mean, it was amazing. Judas Contract's awesome, Deathstroke and all Nightwing and all that stuff. But again, it set this such a bar for talent that how do you match it? And then you see Perez's work continue and not only get better, but also stay the spirit of the same. It's no secret. I don't think there's no mystery around it. Most artists, as they get a little older, their pencils tend to get a little looser. It's rare that they get tighter. It's rare that they get, we'll say objectively better. Like certainly there's a usually you can spot a pinnacle in a creator's career, and then I think I attribute the looseness of what I see in most pencilers as they get older is just literal physical aging of people. You also, the time that you spend on a project, I think also changes, where you find ways to shortcut instead of spending the hours meticulously over, obsessing over something. You find that you can get, if not the same result, say 95% of the result, and do it an hour shorter. You're going to do that because that's just smart use of something. We all have a limited resource of time. So in that regard, I think it's generally understood that most artists, as they get a little older, get a little looser. I didn't see that with George Perez. You see his stuff, they reprinted for the charity they did, the JLA Avengers. I'm rereading that right now, and man, and yeah, that book, that book itself is 20 years old, but that book came out 25 years after his Crisis and and Judas Contract and his Avengers stuff, and that book's as tight as those books ever were. As tight, absolutely as tight. His book from Boom, Sirens, from a few years ago, completely as good looking and as tight, in the storytelling. His Avengers run with Busiek from the early 2000s is better than his Avengers run in the late 70s, early 80s. So and that's that early stuff is certainly him learning his, honing his craft. But you figure, okay, well, you get to Crisis and you get to his Wonder Woman stuff. I think his Wonder Woman is where he proved that he could do the monthly in and out. And then, that led to, War of the Gods, which, and then, he eventually gets into the Infinity Gauntlet stuff, which, he left Infinity Gauntlet to go over and finish War of the Gods, etc., so on and so forth. He's just a real special dude. So, I've been going on this for a little bit, but it's really important. And this is a comic book by G.I. Joe, or it's a podcast about G.I. Joe, but it's also, we're talking comic books. And, I hope you guys, understand it. It's, if there's any two people that deserve a remembrance like this, it is Neil Adams and George Perez. Absolutely. If you're really not super familiar with either of their works, for Neil Adams, you should 100% read his Green Lantern, Green Arrow. It's been reprinted and digitally available everywhere. You really should read his early Ra's al Ghul stuff. Superman vs. Muhammad Ali is a lot of fun, and it's really good, and it really captures his knack for being able to render real faces and things like that. For Perez, I actually wouldn't recommend Infinity Gauntlet because it's not a finished piece, because Ron Lim takes it over halfway through. But I 100% recommend Crisis. 100% recommend the JLA Avengers. I really recommend the Avengers, just his regular Avengers run with Kurt Busiek, because that is, whatever he proved with Wonder Woman being able to write and pencil a monthly, in the late 80s, month in, month out for, I think he did it for like 40 some issues, 30 some issues for like 3 years, really. Him coming back to Avengers and knocking it out monthly, that was the feat of a, what would have been at the time, 50-some-year-old man. That was him saying, yeah, I can still do this, and do it at such a high level. And the other unspoken one we haven't mentioned is his work with Peter David on the Maestro stuff with the Hulk in Future Imperfect. He created that, and that story, I've read Peter David talk about that, where he had this idea, and he and George, I think they had done Sex and Violence together already, and he basically pitched it to George. George agreed, and he went back to his editor and was like, hey, I got an artist for this miniseries, and you weren't supposed to kind of do that. You weren't supposed to really attach an artist to a project. And the editor was like, man, you can't. And he goes, it's George Perez. And he goes, oh, absolutely. We'll have him the contract in the morning. And what you got was Future Imperfect, which is just dynamite storytelling. So, with that, we're going to jump into our regular segments here for this show. Shirley agrees. And just say, appreciate who you got while you got them, because we will not all be here forever. And sometimes brilliance is fleeting, but comics are forever. So
You were saying?
I was saying, and this is the segment where we look at comic books that were on the rack during the same month of G.I. Joe that we're covering. So we're covering G.I. Joe 125. It's cover dated June 92. And over at Marvel Comics, we're still in the midst of our Cletus Cassidy Carnage introduction. I believe this is the second issue of the Carnage, 3-issue intro thing. It's the one, it's Amazing 363. It's the one with Venom's face and Carnage's face and Spidey's face. It's a kind of an awkward looking cover, but it's become classic. I think actually the green helps cement it for some reason. The green kind of makes everything else pop on the page. What else is on here? Oh, well, listen, Barbie fashion is all the way up to 18, and Barbie's on the moon. What? Barbie's on the moon. Barbie's on the moon. If you guys get that joke, God bless you. Speaking of Larry Hama, Cops, The Job is on the rack. Now, I've always thought this was a spinoff of the cartoon Cops, because Marvel did that book. I don't think that it is. I think I've read this, and I think it's just a straight up comic book about cops, like a police officer comic book, which is kind of neat. It did not last very long. But yeah, it's written by Larry Hama. So I say we give it a look. Let's see. Doctor Strange is squaring off against Galactus. I hope everyone enjoyed Multiverse of Madness. I certainly did. I liked it a lot. I don't think it's a great standalone film, but as another chapter in the ongoing Marvel saga, I think it was had a lot of fun to it, and was exciting to watch. Again, I don't think it stands up alone on its own. It's certainly not the best multiverse movie we've seen all year. That would be Everything Everywhere All at Once. If you haven't seen that movie, stop. Go right now and go see it. It's wonderful. Everything else is kind of middling. It's kind of, it's kind of just mid-90s stuff going on. There's not a ton of, real legend makers here this month over at Marvel. Like, the X-Men are, Jim Lee is winding down his time. The X-Men actually have a crossover with Ghost Rider this month over at X-Men number 9 and Ghost Rider number 26. I will always, the way that they draw Ghost Rider's head on the cover of X-Men of Ghost Rider 26, it's like, I think it's supposed to be like his head is exploding or something, but it has always disturbed me. I don't know what is going on with it, and I've never enjoyed it. But yeah, I mean, everything else is just kind of middle of the road, it's kind of that, okay, 90s. Lots of speed lines, lots of hash marks. Quesada does a really nice cover on X Factor 79. This is the new era X Factor with Quicksilver and Madrox, the Multiple Man, and Polaris and Havoc, and they're working for the government. And it's a cover theme that has music liner notes on the back, which actually ties into Multiverse of Madness. If you've seen that, that's a fun one. So
You were saying?
now we're going to look at DC comic books. And what is DC doing? DC's also a little middle of the road. And again, this is pre-summer, so we're not in the middle of any big, huge company-wide crossovers. The Flash is continuing that year one story I talked about last week, which is really, really great. Green Arrow is running 2 issues a month, which seems excessive, but it is, and it was a popular book at the time. This is the Mike Grell Green Arrow, issue 62 and 63. Green Lantern 25 is fun. Hal Jordan and Guy Gardner fight to decide who's going to be Earth's Green Lantern with Justice League in the mix. This leads into the Guy Gardner miniseries and eventually his own ongoing series. As a big Guy Gardner fan, I was ecstatic about this at the time. I was very happy. This is a wonderful book, Green Lantern Mosaic. It is Jon Stewart running a Mosaic planet made of different cities from all over the galaxy. So different chunks of worlds that made up this one city. And so John had to find out, figure out a way to make it function, make it work as a, as a society. And so it really did a lot to further his character. And Brian Steelfreeze did the covers, and Cully Hamner did the pencils. Cully Hamner, sorry. I always said Hammer. It's funny. Oh, Dan Panosian inked it. He was at Golden Apple this weekend. I didn't realize he inked that. I would have expressed my gratitude, satisfaction. The problem with this book is that it is written by Gerard Jones, who did not do good things in life and is paid for it via the state. So it's a tough book that they can't really reprint anytime soon. Because they'd be giving him royalties, frankly, because he wrote it. So it's tough. It's tough when you get books like that, because it really was a good book. And creepy stuff. Anyway, let's see. The Question Quarterly, number 5. Man, the question was such a good series. If you've never read it, you should pick this stuff up. They're really cheap. You can find old Question. This is the Denny O'Neil. Dennis Cowan book. You really should pick that up when you can. It is it's just good. And this one, actually, Joe Quesada did the pencil, did the interior pencils. Dennis Cowan did the cover on it, needed for the quarterly stuff. But and again, this is Joe Quesada pre-running Marvel. Joe Quesada, this is just straight up penciler Joe Quesada. But the Question is just a wonderful book. Superman, it's up to issue number 68. He's fighting Deathstroke on the cover, and that's exciting. But that means we are just scant months away from the death of Superman. So we're going to be getting that. That's going to be exciting. So that's it for DC Comics.
You were saying?
And now,
mass is ready.
all right. So one of the perils of recording in an open-air neighborhood is sometimes you get neighborhood chats. So if you guys heard my neighbors discussing some stuff going on, it's all good. I'm sure they hear me discussing this, so it's all good. We are going to dig into G.I. Joe, Real American Hero 125. It's got an exciting cover, a nice odd angle. It's Flint being in his Eco-Warrior, as voted on by the fans, Eco-Warrior suit, being dangled over a pit of sludge, and there's some zombie-like hands reaching out from the sludge, which nice effect, because it does make you think like it's like literally like zombie undead hands clawing for Flint, as Cesspool looks on, by Andrew Wildman. I think I like Wildman's covers more than I am enamored with his interiors, but they're still good. It's all good. It's lots of open screaming mouths, but still good. The colors are nice. I think when you get we are getting into that neon era, but it pops, and you have the pink of the Cesspool kind of reflected in the skin tone of Duke or Flint there. So I think that works.
Yo, Joe!
So this one is called Diptych, Diptych. Referencing last month, we had the Triptych, which we had the 3-in-1 storytelling style. So this month we're getting 2-in-1 storytelling style. So we open on a splash page of Mutt and Junkyard and Shockwave surrounded. They're at the Jersey Shore of Broca Beach. So if you recall last issue, we had the 3 ongoing stories. It was the Drug Enforcement Forces fighting at Broca Beach. We also had Flint and his Eco Warriors. They were down in South America, I believe. Where is it? Where are they in South America? Gulf of Mexico, rather. They were fighting Cesspool and the sludge dudes, and then there were the ninjas wrapping up their stuff in Transcarpathia. So, and those stories were told, one panel each, pretty much one panel each on each page, kind of in pace. So so they were like 3 snapshots per page of what was happening instead of traditional sequential storytelling. So this book, just to broad stroke it, is essentially doing 2 it's the same style, but it's only doing 2 of the stories at once. Yeah, we'll get into if I think that's great, because I don't. I think it was I'll just jump to. I think it was a good test for last issue, but if you're going to drop it and not do it, then for this issue, then just do regular flashback storytelling. That's my take on it. Because then what are we just? Is it just going to be one story next issue, which it might be, but then that's nothing special about it. So then it's just an issue without any subplots. We'll see. We'll get there. So I don't mean to prejudge it, but having it just be these 2 parallel stories in this issue, it was fine, but it didn't pop like I felt the last issue did. I think the last issue worked pretty well. So the Joes are cornered here.
Yo, Joe!
It's written by Larry Hama, penciled by Andrew Wildman, Randy Emerlin inks, Bob Sharon coloring, Rick Parker lettering, Hildy Mesnick is the editor, Tom DeFalco editing in chief. And here we are in the Gulf of Mexico. The Eco Warriors there on their battle copters, and they have a couple. They have a couple Eco Warriors captured. It's Flint and let's see who is. I think Ozone is still flying around. Clean Sweep and Flint have been captured. So they're on this sludge, picture like an oil derrick that looks a lot like the Joe's Air Sea platform, but it's just generating sludge. This Cobra polluting sludge rather. All right, so it's a kind of a big shot of Ozone attacking them from above. There's not Yo,
Joe!
Sorry, it just wasn't. I don't know. There's something. I think this is speaking to the general. I wish they hadn't done this 2-in-1 story. Like I liked it with the 3-in-1 because that was interesting, and 2-in-1 just seems weird. Because it's basically, for me, what it is the storytelling is you're just getting postcards now. It's just postcard snapshots of all the happenings, and it's maybe more tolerable when there's 3 of them, but when there's 2 of them, I don't know. So we got the head man. He's telling these 2 Cobras to jump into the amusement park roller coaster train to kind of and run it, so it roller coasters around behind where the Joes are at, and then down in the Gulf of Mexico, we're reminded that Flint is wearing a voice-activated camo headset, and it's keyed to the G.I. Joe name. So this is what's hilarious is that the Joes are wearing headsets that they can still communicate with them, but they've been in custody of Cobra for a few minutes now, and Cobra didn't think to rip their headsets off them. So even if their hands aren't free to hit a button, none of these sludge vipers or toxo vipers think to take the giant headset off of Flint, which is awkward, to say the least.
Yo, Joe!
And you remember, in Broca Beach, there were 2 Broca Beachians, Cobra soldiers, that were going to help the Joes because the Cobras that live in Broca Beach also don't want Headman and his drug dealers there. So it's technically the Joes versus the drug dealers, and the Cobras helping the Joes undercover versus the drug dealers. But these Cobras, these 2 guys named Mike and Ike, which is awesome, they're carrying Cobra weapons, Cobra laser weapons and stuff, Cobra rifles. So that's the identifier that keeps being brought up, because remember Fred, who got gunned down, and his wife, they were carrying a Cobra rifle. Now these 2 dudes are running around with Cobra rifles. So that's the big MacGuffin that Larry's putting in play here, that the Joes are going to notice the ordinance and say, why are Cobra rifles being held by quote unquote civilians? That's really weird. But these guys do also want to get the drug dealers off the streets. This would be a good time to point out that I think one of the things that I don't necessarily like doesn't strike me as Wildman's chins. And this is 100% a style preference. Normally I don't get into this stuff. A lot of people like what they like. So this is just me speaking here. his characters all have a very thin narrowing of their chins, right? So they're often yelling, so their mouths are agape. But when you do that, everyone's jaw kind of elongates. If you look in a mirror and go scream or something, you'll see that, right? And that's a real feature of his drawing, where almost every character takes on this super elongated chin. It's not my favorite style in the world. And Mike and Ike here are certainly exhibiting that in a big way. And again, that's a personal preference. It's not saying it's bad, or it's not saying, whatever. It's just saying that that's one thing about his style that rubs me a little. Yeah, I don't know. It's not my most favorite thing. Down here in Gulf of Mexico, they're trying to get word to Ozone, or to Ozone, that he needs to execute Plan B, the big secret weapon, whatever that is. We don't know what that is. And Ozone was like, "Well, I can't leave you."
Yo, Joe!
There is a page here for sweet tarts that has a picture of a sweet tart in it, and it is on a regular page. There's no actual sweet tart attached, and it says, "Lick this." And then right below it, it says, "It doesn't taste very good, does it?" That's because that's paper. Real sweet tarts, however, come in 6 explosive flavors. See, that's funny. I actually think that's funny. That's my kind of thing. Like, that's my kind of joke. So as we cut back down to the amusement park, see, that's the thing with these snapshots. 1, 2. I'm going to jump forward. 1, 2, 3. So with these snapshots, the movement of getting those headhunters from the one part of the, they're coming up behind Shockwave here, and like this ambush that they set up literally on the first page, it doesn't actually happen until three pages from now, even. So, and well, not only 3 pages from now, but there's also a 2-page commercial spread in the middle. So you're talking 6 pages later. So, pacing wise, it just feels drawn out. I think that's part of it too, is that the storytelling on this is a little more what I would call sequential panel to panel versus snapshot, but they're setting it up to be snapshot because they're doing these, half-page spreads of each story, so like it should be more. I guess I'm pointing at the execution of it, is that it should be more moment to moment instead of him saying, "Hey, go, you guys get on this train and go get them," and then we get another panel of them on the train, and then we have to wait 3 more panels for them to actually fire on them. It should have been either get on the train, and then the next one they should have just been firing on them. You know what I mean? Like, there should have been one step left removed, because what you're doing is you're really breaking it down into time snapshots by doing this split storytelling. Anyway, my opinion. Take it for what you will. Flint is being held by Cesspool, and this is great. Cesspool reminding us that he was a formerly big corporate lawyer, etc., and so on. What I really like about this issue is that we end up with a Cesspool origin story. Spoiler alert, which is a lot of fun, and I didn't realize that was in this until we get there. But I really dig it. And again, I kind of like Cesspool's costume's kind of cool. I think the character's kind of stupid as far as like his motivations. But his costumes I kind of dig.
Yo, Joe!
We revisit on that really old-looking drug-addled kid. It's Fred Jr., and he's over his mom's dead body, and he's her rifle's laying there, and Bulletproof is telling him that we're gonna get the slime who killed your mother. And Fred Jr. is crying. He's got the word "ouch" tattooed on his forehead, which is ridiculous. Flint and Clean Sweep, they break free of their captors, and Flint yells into his headset, negative on the assault, execute Plan B. That's an order, so they get the word out to Ozone. They just absolutely got to do Plan B. So that's exciting.
Yo, Joe!
And meanwhile, Fred Jr. is just all about revenge. If I hadn't been such a waste-faced drug fiend, old Dad wouldn't have gotten to the headman's face and got himself blown away. And Mom wouldn't have lost it and tried to get even for Dad. She wouldn't have even taken Dad's extra Cobra assault rifle and gone again, reiterating that it's a Cobra assault rifle. That's funny, and it's that is a bit of a MacGuffin for that portion of the plot, and reminding us that they left the assault rifle, and Ozone takes his battlecopter and heads the other direction, but he's going to be back, as we're being told, ASAP with the secret weapon.
Yo, Joe!
Now we got your 2-page spread, and now we're getting follow up on those two dudes that were circling around to ambush Shockwave. And so they do. They shoot Shockwave seemingly in the back, and they seemingly get him. And now this page tells, pacing wise, there's nice parallels on this, where Shockwave's getting shot in the back, and at the same time Flint and Clean Sweep are getting recaptured, so to speak, by the Cobra Troopers. They're getting cracked across the head. Their voice activated comm system taken away.
Yo, Joe!
More hot assault rifle talk. Fred Jr. saying that they left the assault rifle. I know what I can do with this. No more kicking Freebase Freddy around. No way, no how. And now old Freddy's got the ways and the means. So there you go. So Freebase Freddy is just fabulous. And then down in Cesspool, he's walking them through the complex. See, again, it's too short. Like, it's too panel to panel. They could have chosen to go further with this. As far as these panels, and like take us further into the story of what's going on, because they're just these big half-page splashes.
Yo, Joe!
Mutt and Junkyard, they're having their moment. These slimy headhunters just shot Shockwave in the back. By the way, Aaron Wildman's rendition of Mutt is an absolute creature from the depths of hell. Mutt looks nothing like a dog. He looks like a hound from hell. And then before they can drop Flint into the sludge pit, Flint kind of outmaneuvers and they drop a Viper into the pit. And we see on the next page,
Yo, Joe!
that Viper has now been eaten up by the sludge, and his skeletal hand is popping out, very much like the Joker's hand in Batman, coming out of the slime pit at Ace Chemicals, and that's the hand that's on the cover. Like, so they're not zombies on the cover; they're like sludge riddled dead carcasses that that Flint's going to be dipped into. So rest in peace to that Toxo Viper. He fell right into the concentrated plasma tox. And what's funny is this is a reference to the file card. Cesspool says it's one of the distinct disadvantages of being in the, quote, leaky suit brigade. The suit they give you is worthless as a politician's promise. And I believe that is straight from the file card, which Larry would have written, that the suits they were given are just made shoddily. So, yes, you're a Toxo Viper, but your suit's going to leak and you're going to die from it all. So, there you go. Over in the DEF, Mike and Ike are there to help the Joes, but the Joes run into them and are like, you guys got to freeze. You put your weapon down. And Mike and Ike are trying to explain that they're friends.
Yo, Joe!
Mutt and Junkyard, they're just caught. So this is just a panel of them getting caught. So these are like snippets. Flint is now being hoisted by a rope over the pit, and he's slowly being lowered down. And this is where you get into poor bad guy executions here. We just watched them. A Toxo Viper just fell into the pit and died. And now, instead of just dropping the Joes into the pit, he rigs up a rope and is dropping them slowly via rope while he tells them his story. So this is traditional James Bond level villain stuff, which is very fitting for Cesspool because that's very much the type of villain that he is. This over dramatic, Blofeld-esque type villain.
Yo, Joe!
The Joes kick down the door. There's more open mouths, more screaming with thin, elongated jaws. Everyone is screaming in this picture. I can't say that I enjoy it that much. But everyone is screaming, even Mike and Ike, but they're teamed up with the Joes. I like this headmaster says, the Joes have teamed up with the locals, which makes me like the local Teamsters. Like what? He says, don't they know who the locals are? And then here we go into the origin of Cesspool, which is really great. And he's a corporate dude, and he looks, Jeffrey's got full head of black hair, and he's talking about they've already crushed the unions, they've looted the workers' pension, inflated the value of the stocks, and worst of all, they rigged the employees' football pools. That's the biggest sin. Some guy says he has the perspectives for an employee savings plan that would give us a whole new pool of cash to dip into. And this other guy has a plan to trick the workers into converting their life insurance into comprehensive medical coverage, and then assigning them duty to high toxic density work areas. If they die quickly, we come out way ahead. That one, I don't get that one. Because wouldn't converting their life insurance, if they die quickly, you want to make them beneficiaries. So if you convert it to medical coverage, even if they die quickly, their medical costs are gonna be big. I think this last lawyer, this blonde dude on the right, I think he needs to find a new job. He's got a bad idea here. I genuinely don't think that's a great idea. I feel like a better idea there would have been there. We got a trick to convert the to have us take out life insurance on our employees, and then we're going to assign them to the high toxic density work areas so that when they die, we'll make a lot of money. I think that blonde guy's out of a job.
Yo, Joe!
More gunplay with the DEF. And then we see here in Cesspool, and this next few pages, it's really all about Cesspool. It says, Mr. DeLiva, we've been compromised a small army of federal marshals, attorneys general, and it says attorney general's office, but it should be, it's attorney general's office investigators. So if it's one attorney general, because if it was multiple attorney generals, it would be attorneys general office investigators. Anyway, IRS goons and EPA inspectors, they're storming the main gates. They've got injunctions. They've got, so it's egad, some egregious Pollyanna has sounded the toxin tocin. I've got no choice but to dump the evidence. So this is angry Cesspool going to make his getaway.
Yo, Joe!
Mike and Ike just bought the farm, so they're gone. And Mr. DeLiva is now manually gone all the way down to his toxic waste sludge dump factory, and with one turn, he's going to dump all the evidence of all his malfeasance, which doesn't make any sense. Because his malfeasance was all in, the stuff we talked about on the previous page. It was all paperwork. It was all, we're stealing from this, we're stealing from that. And yes, you've got all this toxic waste stuff, but he's going to dump the toxic waste, and he thinks that's what's going to get him off here. This sycophant says, I wouldn't touch that valve, sir. It was built by one of our own substandard subcontractors, and it's never been properly maintained.
Yo, Joe!
So now Shockwave is back up with the DEF. Shockwave is alive and well. You do see the bullet holes in the back of his flak jacket, but it says this should serve to remind you goons that old Bulletproof isn't the only Joe who wears an armored vest, and he's shooting at the headhunters from behind. And Cesspool gets his own Joker / Two-Face origin, where like half of his head is engulfed in this toxic cesspool stuff. And that's how he becomes who he becomes. So the Joes have wrangled up Headman.
Yo, Joe!
On the next page, he is smiling and happy because he's fairly confident he's going to be back out on the streets in no time. And Cesspool is saying that they say the poisons did more than scar my face. They say the toxins seeped through my skull and altered my brain. He says he became a genius. You be the judge. I know it certainly made him lose his hair and his hair go white. And the scar is like a strict scar. It's not like a melting scar. So that doesn't really jive with this toxic waste thing. Unless like that valve just sliced open his eyeball. Anyway, yeah, I think he's got a fun look. If it's a little, kooky, he's still got a fun look. His this drawing of Cesspool's got a very Art Adams feel to it.
Yo, Joe!
Another 2-page spread for the Marvel Master Vision 1-800 game. Now we see why back in Broca Beach, rather, we see why the headmaster was so smiling. He So he goes through a trap door in the floor, which is fine. Like, fine. The getaways and, that's fine. But, like, it happened right in front of the Joes. And Shockwave, who had just been shot, so he might have been out of it a little bit. His reaction is that, quote, he disappeared. What is he, a magician? No, there's no smoke drawn here. Clearly the floor opened and he fell through. Shockwave looks like a moron. It's like putting your hand over a kid's eye and you remove his hamburger off the table and it's like, ta-da, he's gone. But there's no hand over an eye. Headman just goes through the floor and he's fooled Shockwave. Shockwave might be the biggest mark in any magic show you've ever seen. The Cutter is the only one that realizes, oh, he's got a trap door. That's funny. So Shockwave, you're a dope in this one. Now, granted, you did get shot. I'll say maybe you were concussed. And we see in the Gulf, we see what the plan B was. Now, there's one thing that happens here is there's no real explanation given as to why Cesspool doesn't continue to kill these Joes. They say there's a helicopter coming. It's a Tomahawk. And he just says, all right, bring them topside. But why? Like, you were gonna kill him. So what's the, you know what I mean? And again, this is very Bond level villainy. And not that I'm looking for Flint or anyone to get killed, but it's weird. There's no real good reason given that he doesn't continue to just lower them into the pool. Granted, the bigger question is, why isn't he just throwing them in the pool like they did the Viper?
Yo, Joe!
And back in Broca Beach, there's a whole series of traps and mazes and tunnels, and there's booby traps. So they're not going to be chasing after him, which is a little bit of a weak sauce excuse, guys. But the Joes are now asking the question that needs to be asked because it's been introduced 500 times. Bulletproof is asking, I'm wondering about those two amusement park employees, Ike and Mike. Why did they have Cobra assault rifles? And Cutter says, we left another Cobra assault rifle right out on the street with that Fred kid. And we meet the secret weapon that Ozone was going to get. He brings back Mr. Jones from the Attorney General's office. And it's a lawyer. And he says, all your assets have been seized. An avalanche of injunctions are about to fall on your head. And I have a staff of hundreds working on whittling you away with the death of 1,000 paper cuts. He's going to make polluting very unprofitable. To which Cesspool replies with, ugh.
Yo, Joe!
And so, in the town up the coast from Broca Beach, where we thought Fred Jr. was going to get some kind of physical revenge using that laser rifle, we see that he's taking the rifle and he's trading it for more drugs. That's right. More drugs. So Freebase Freddy has not escaped his demons. He is trading Cobra armament for drugs. And this is not Headman. I don't believe it's supposed to be Headman. Well, let's see, though. He's got the same kind of mustache Headman has, but it certainly is not dressed the same, and he's got a different hairstyle. So it's actually more Vincent Price man than Headman. So Freebase Freddy is still in the throes of demons, and Cesspool is very upset with the lawyers, saying that you can't seize his assets. And the Joes are smiling and they're heading away. So this is all very, very Sunbow-y kind of a wrap up. This is a lot more cartoonish of a wrap up than I think the comic book is used to. Certainly they've gotten into legal matters and, declaring Cobra Island a legal state, things like that. So they've played around with this stuff before, but this just has a real ending of like, this is how a Sunbow animated episode or a DIC episode would end. That's this whole thing. That's it for those pages. Again, I get why they did it, but thematically it doesn't work, especially if, like, let's say next issue, if it really is just dedicated to just the ninja story, because we've taken that off entirely, this issue, it just doesn't. It just, the cadence is weird. It might have been an experiment that maybe didn't work. We got a Zartan profile in the back, 2 pages of good Zartan goodness, with Larry Hama and Jimmy Palmiotti doing the inks on that Zartan picture. I like that a lot. I would say, I think it could be a little bigger. You could have expanded it on the page. Oh no, it would have been hard because the bow goes to the right. So yeah, it's probably as wide as it could be, but it's a good looking Zartan. I like it. In a post box from the pit, we've got letters from James Brandjen, Brandtjen, from PTC, Georgia. I don't know where that's from, but Brandjen, James Brandjen. Mark Cabrera from Pasadena, California. Byron Carl from Sydney, Australia. Sean Day from New Milford, Connecticut. Kevin Howell from Wallington, New Jersey. And John Stibe from Waukesha, Wisconsin. Yeah, hey there. And and we get the full introduction, welcome to the book for Hildy Mesnick, the editor, and Kevin Kobasic, the assistant editor. And they're doing the letters pages. So Larry's no longer doing letter pages. I don't think he's done them for a little while now. But this is confirmation. So there you go. This is funny. There's a bit here, and then, again, remember, this is 1992, says, someone's asking, Storm Shadow used the word, in issue 120, he said, we have to lie doggo here and not move for at least an hour. And their answer to him is our elementary school, and he says, what does doggo mean? And they said, what is, as our elementary school teachers used to say, if you don't know a word, look it up. But since we're such nice folks, we'll tell you that doggo means in hiding, used chiefly in the phrase to lie doggo. Okay, this is 1992. This is pre-Google. It is snarky when people say that today. In a world without the internet, especially when doggo is a colloquialism. Can you please explain to me, Hildy and Kevin, where someone were to look up what the word doggo means? Because is that in the dictionary? Maybe it is. I don't know. Guess what? I haven't looked it up. But in 1992, someone taking the time to write into a fan letter to say, hey, I love your book. You used a phrase. Can you tell me what it means? Don't tell them to go look it up, because there is no Google. Don't use the 1992 equivalent of Google it. Just tell them. I'm just saying. I'm on the letter writer's side on this one. A little snarky. Any hoots. That's it for now, everyone. I really hope you appreciated it. I certainly enjoyed it. And next month we'll be back with G.I. Joe 126, which features the chilling return of a fan favorite. We're going back into some of the ninja history as Firefly comes back from the grave. And now you, Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.